Anomalous Abstractigate Infinitessimus is the fifth full-length album from Gigan, a technical death metal band born out of Florida and now based out of Chicago. The band is best known as a technical death metal band and an avant-garde death metal band, one that has sort of a psychedelic and science fiction undercurrent to its sound, which includes the work of Eric Herseman, a guitarist and kind of the main songwriter, founder of the band, who was best known early on for his work with Diabolic on the Infinity Through Purification album. And you remember that album, it was a big shift for the band. It was a switch to more of a technical death metal style with a lot of kind of sweep picking and a lot of more technical guitar prowess up front for it. It was a big shift, and I think his work on that album got him a gig with Hate Eternal, and for the I Monarch album. You'll remember that that was kind of a shift into bigger popularity for the group. They'd already been pretty big for their first two albums, and by 2005, it was kind of a bigger phenomenon for Hate Eternal, especially in the world of technical death metal and death metal in general, and that allowed him to, and one of the other band members from the group, to step out into their own thing. The general high level of success for technical death metal in the mid to late 2000s led to signing to Napalm Records and getting an EP out there that was different technical death metal. It was certainly something that was special, and by the time they had signed to Willowtip and started putting out records, they'd started calling it psychedelic extreme metal. Of course, at the time, that was a big deal. I've talked about like Aranci Pazuzu and bands like that, where they shifted into a headier sound. They found something different to add to extreme metal, and this was a band that really took it further. And I don't mean they just created something that was trippy or psychedelic and had psychedelic rock in it. This was very different. This is something that was avant-garde death metal that pushed the use of guitar effects and techniques into something that was technical and different and just really out there for its time in the early 2010s. So a lot of great albums from this band over the years. They've worked up a signature sound, and that's basically what we're going to get here on this album. But there's a lot of nuance to their full discography. So we'll start out with a clip here, and then I'll talk about what kind of their signature is and how they've expanded on this record. So the big shift for technical death metal in the 2010s was really finding more places to go than pure 100% pedal to the metal technicality and force, and the way that it had become less than organic. It had become something like machined out parts, and the songwriting just became more based on a twitch level of just computerized movement. And you'd think that such a skilled band and these members that were putting out something that was almost science fiction oriented would lean into something that was more cut and dry. But in the same way that a band like Piran or Imperial Triumphant blurred the lines of technical death metal into the abstract and avant-garde and changed the actual shape of the rhythms, there's this Portal-esque mutation within what Gigan does that has gone through some very extreme alterations over the years, and that meant that every record was different, but you could tell that it was a Gigan record. So by the time I had reviewed Undulating Waves of Rain Biotic Iridescence in 2017, I still felt like Gigan was very much an over-the-top band, but they had cut away at some of the avant-garde nature of their work in the sense that they were going more for a varietal dynamic that had matured in its vision. I think that that's in the way that they're communicating something, and they're not going fully over the top and kind of repeating their sort of the gimmick of it all. To know what that gimmick is, it's really difficult to explain. I think that they're using the oscillation of different guitar effects to create aberrations of the usual rhythmic underpinnings of technical death metal and death metal in general. So there's still pure death metal at the heart of what they do. There always has been, but they've mutated it and malformed it into unusual shapes over time. So what this record does is that it calls back to it basically picks up where they left off in 2017, but it creates something that flows a little bit more naturally. It sounds a little bit more organic in its drum production values. It's a little bit more tempered throughout in terms of presenting a progression throughout, and that means that we start in a place that is very familiar. It reminds us who Gigan are, and then they quickly begin to form this bizarro vacuum of space where they insert their signature signature before they blur that a little bit over time. The big thing to note about this record is that it plays with both guitar textures and sounds as much as it plays with tempo and movement in a way that over the course of the full listen, it feels like there's a destination that keeps shifting over time, and they keep moving the bar. They keep moving that pinpoint of where they're traveling with it. And for me, there aren't a lot of bands that fully blur the movement of death metal at such an incredible pace and technical ability, other than like Portal and bands like that. So sitting with this record, it does feel like it is still an abstraction of very classical forms. It's something that I can recognize as a fan of probably old school death metal first, someone who loves everything from Formulas Fail to the Flesh to Mithras and those similar abstractions of like Morbid Angel and their continuation. But this is still something very different. It's something that Gigan has put together over time that is completely theirs, and it makes for this wild, again, psychedelic metal evolution of the band that goes for interesting use of noise, different guitar effects we haven't heard from the band before. They're not quite going for the full-on Phaser Fire War that they did on previous records, but we get a more uneven flow throughout that makes for a great, just an energetic and intense listen, which stands out much more than anything else that we're getting that is sold to us as kind of like science fiction metal or whatever. So for me, this is a band that's kind of in a class of their own. They found their own sound, and there's no reason not to bring it back. So in a lot of ways, if you're already a fan, you really are going to love this album because it is Gigan probably at their best recorded, most thoughtfully arranged, like full listen. Although they had some great records in the past, like the 2013 or so, that was kind of a really intense peak. But this is, again, something more dynamic, something a little bit more memorable, something intensely familiar, of course. There's continuity through all their work. So they struck the right balance for me as a fan, where they brought themselves back after many years, and the quality level is above and beyond. So I was just completely stoked on this one. I think it's just so far above average, and a very high recommendation for me. So check that out for yourself. It released on October 25th. And read my review for more coherent thoughts, a little bit more detail in some of the songs, and just my thoughts on the band in general.